everyone. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know we've got a few more people coming in, but we have extra seats, so let's go ahead and make this happen. First and foremost, welcome. Thank you guys for being here tonight. My name is Quinn Pettifer. I'm the Community Outreach Manager for the Gazette. I have to say this is a very impressive turnout considering what, 5 days ago? Maybe 5 days ago, the Gazette editorial insights team decided that we wanted to put something together to present the opportunity for the Cedar Rapids School District representatives to do a community forum that talks about the facilities master plan. And what an impressive turnout, so thank you so much. I also have to say to the Cedar Rapids Public Library and their staff, once again, thank you so much. Their accommodations and their ability to work with us in a very short, quick turnaround was, again, impressive, and also just they understood the significance of having this conversation. So thank you so much to Susan, Charity, and Amber and their team. Tonight, as mentioned, we're going to be hearing from representatives of the Cedar Rapids School District and the Facilities Planning Committee. We're going to begin with an overview of the facilities plan. Then we're going to hear from our moderators about specific questions that have been submitted to this point, from process to the phases to brick and mortar, as well as beyond, just overall education. So we have a number of questions that have already been submitted. And our staff here tonight, and I want to point out Adam Sullivan as well as Sarah Binder. They are here to take questions. For those of you that are seeing this live streaming, as well as just anybody that's in the audience here tonight, you can also go to thegazette.com/CR School Forum, and you are more than welcome to submit your questions throughout the program. We have had a number of questions, and again, we're all kind of blown away by the fact that within the last few days, we've received a significant number of questions, and we want to make sure that we address as many as possible. This is a 90-minute forum, so the likelihood we're going to be able to get through every question is slim, but we are confident that we're going to be able to get through a lot of the questions that you have already submitted, as well as some of those bigger picture pieces tonight. The intent and the commitment from the Gazette is that we are going to publish all of the questions in the days ahead. So be looking for that online as well as within our hard copy of the Gazette. And if you have a hard copy question, just simply raise it up and look for Sarah as well as Adam. They will collect those questions. They are putting them into our online system. So if you don't see them going and running up to Todd and Zach, it's just for a matter of making sure our program is flowing without disruption. So they're getting them. Just be assured of that. They're getting them, they're receiving them, but we want to make sure that we're making this program go as smooth as possible. I want to emphasize that we have a lot of ground to cover. So I am going to be sitting right over there in that reserved seat with some 2-minute warnings. I'll be standing up every once in a while. We have the presentation that will be going on first for 15 minutes, and then the questions. So I will be helping Zach and Todd, who I'll be introducing here in just a couple minutes, to make sure that we're getting through as much as possible. So I'm the bad guy tonight. If you want to hear more about a certain question, but yet I've made the note to move on, you can always blame me. It's fine. It's no big deal. All right. With that, I want to introduce our moderators for the evening. I want to first introduce the Gazette's opinion editor, Todd Dorman. A round of applause. Todd loves attention, and Zach does too. So, and also co-moderating with Todd tonight is the Gazette's executive editor, Zach Kucharski.
We'll start with the presentation. We've scheduled about 15 minutes for that. Quinn will give the 2-minute warning, and then we'll go into questions. And we're hoping to keep the flow moving with 1 to 2 minute responses from there. I would like to thank and welcome our panelists at the same time. They cleared their schedule to make this happen, and we appreciate that. Starting closest to me, and then going across, is Board President John Laverty, Vice President Nancy Humbles, Superintendent of Schools Dr. Brad Buck, member of the Cedar Rapids School Facilities Planning Committee, Shelley Pike, and the Chief Financial Officer of the district, Steve Graham. So thank you all, and welcome. And with that, we will turn it over for the presentation. Dr. Bach.
Yeah, very good. So thanks, Zach, and Quinn, and Todd, and the library staff. Thanks for this opportunity to be in front of the group this evening. So my first responsibility tonight is to contextualize a little bit of this conversation. So we're going to drill down on the facilities conversation, but we thought it would be important for people to understand that facilities is one part of the conversation and work in which we're engaged to deliver on the promise of every learner future ready. So I don't know what it says about me, but everybody I talked to today said, go fast. So I promise I'll try to do that. So where I'd like to start is we have a proud tradition in Cedar Rapids, and we should be proud of that. We have had a strong academic tradition, especially at our comprehensive high schools, but throughout our schools, and we have lots of amazing and important activities that our kids have engaged in and continue to engage in. Vocal music, show choir, athletics, all kinds of activities, chess clubs, the list go on and on. And I would tell you, sitting here as a proud graduate of Cedar Rapids Schools, I'm a Truman Van Buren Wilson kid. I'm a part of that tradition and proud to be a part of that tradition. And I have 2 kids at Taft and 1 son at Kennedy, and they're taking advantage of the myriad of activities and opportunities that exist for kids in Cedar Rapids Schools. That said, one of the things, Justin, are you just going to keep flowing? Very good. So one of the realities that we have in Cedar Rapids Schools is this. While we're proud of our rich history, there is still challenges within our data sets. And the first example I would give you is this. In 3rd grade English language arts proficiency, depending on your race or ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, your gender, the intersection of those things, you are somewhere between 30 to 65% in 3rd grade English language arts. 8th grade math proficiency differs from 26% to 67%, depending on the category in which you find yourself as a child in Cedar Rapids Schools, and our graduation rates vary from 55 to 93%. I say that because it's important to contextualize where we were in this conversation and where we are going forward. When I talk about the groups that I've just mentioned, it's important to know that the traditionally underserved groups are not only the groups that exist in Cedar Rapids Schools, but in the state and across the nation. And the students that we're talking about are students that qualify for free or reduced lunch through federal guidelines. They're students who are racially and ethnically diverse, students with individualized education plans or IEPs, often thought of as students in special education, and students for whom English is not their first language. So one of the things we know is the data that I just showed you, but to put a finer point on it, if a student finds him or herself in one or more of those categories, there's some realities in our current system. They are less likely to be proficient on the assessments that are put in front of them. They're more likely to be suspended. They're less likely to be identified for our gifted and talented program, AP courses, and other college-bearing credit courses. They're less likely to graduate, and they're less likely prepared for a complex world of work. So that should get us to significant action, and it has. We're in the midst of a process to redefine our vision and our mission. So our new vision is every learner future ready, and we are working hard to deliver on that promise for every one of our students. And our new mission is predicated on this idea of personalized learning, where we have a plan, a pathway, and we help students explore their passion. All of that said, we have a strategic plan in front of us, a 5-year strategic plan, and we're in the first year of that plan. There are 5 major focus areas in that plan. I'm not going to go into detail on every single one of those. If you want to go online, if you want further detail on these 5, my State of the District address from December 8th, you can go online and see that. You can get into brisk detail behind our strategic plan. So we are working on our story. We believe we have an important story to tell, and we're starting to experience that tonight. While we have proud academic traditions, we also have work to do within our data sets, and we want to deliver on even better outcomes for all of our kids. The second one we're working on is our workforce. So we did some work with staff in the spring on employee engagement. Through that survey, we found people are proud to work for Cedar Rapids Schools. They intend to continue to work for Cedar Rapids Schools, and we have a staff morale problem. So I had the opportunity to go out into student superintendent input sessions, and through those we identified some additional areas that we have agreed to work on in support of our staff. Challenges related to obtaining substitute teachers, challenges with additionally complex behaviors that are observed in our classrooms, and The disconnect between the ELFC, that's the central office area over on Edgewood Road, and our schools. The third one we're working on is learning. So when I have the opportunity to talk to employers, what they generally don't talk to me about is, I wish kids knew more about photosynthesis. What they talk to me about is, kids need to be able to collaborate, they need to problem solve, they need to critically think. That's the attribute set that we really need for our students. So as we look at learning, how do we design a system that profile a graduate that acknowledges those important soft skills or 21st century skills, with the recognition you still need to know content in tandem with that skill set. The fourth item we're working on is intercultural mindset. So one of the things we know is when you do activities, you can not only better understand your culture and your cultural perspective, but with training and experiences, you can reach across and better understand the mindset of others. So we're working on that. We have 3 schools embedded engaged in a pilot this year. We have Hoover, McKinley, and Jefferson, and we hope that that work will continue to progress in the district. And then the 5th one is facilities. So we recognize this is a broad strategic plan that also includes facilities as part of what we're trying to do to even better serve all of our kids. And I would want to highlight, because I have a group of people in front of me, and I always like to do that when I have the chance. We have a lot of really amazing and interesting, innovative programs underway in the district, and I would guess the one behind me right now, Justin knows behind me, very good. And so you can see those. I won't go into detail on each of them, although I'd be happy to if questions were to arise relative to those. So that's to contextualize a bit for you where we are in our 5-year strategic plan to deliver on the promise of everyone in the future.
That's the best. As you know, my name is Nancy, and I think one of the questions is what led the board to take a closer look at our facilities. And we know that they are aging. We have aging facilities, and some are not ADA compliant. For me, as a board member, I'm looking for active safety for our students, for our teachers, or anyone that walks in that building, visitors. With budget constraints, it's been difficult to keep up with, what should I say, repairing the schools. So we, as a board, voted in 2012 to have Shai Pattery and folks from the school district assess all of our buildings to see what needed to be done, what needed to be improved. So I think that's important to know that this has been an ongoing process since 2012, looking at our facilities, making sure that we're good stewards financially. Like I said, there has been budget cuts. So that's how the process began, because our schools are aging. And we as school board members, and I'll speak for myself, I get the opportunity every year to visit the schools, and I see the conditions that our schools are in. So that's what began the process, as looking at our facilities.
And I'm John Lavery. This is my 11th year on the board, and 2 children through the Cedar Rapids schools. Very proud of the education they received, and also married to someone who I think is 4th generation Czech. Families have opened many schools in the Cedar Rapids School District over the years. And as we looked at those facilities and what Nancy talked about, Shai Pattery's report, it became pretty clear that we needed to do something. You know, we had just gone through the 2008 flood, so since I've been on the board, my first year, we were working through those issues. I've been through another flood. I've been through, let's see, you're our 3rd superintendent, I think, Dr. Buck, since I've been on there. So, and each phase of this journey that I've been on with the district has had different challenges, whether it be the big flood recovery, whether it be trying to build the relationship with the city and collaborate on reducing youth violence, whatever it is. There's different phases, and this phase started to become pretty clear when we saw the Shai Pattery report on the facilities, and at the same time we saw a beginning trend of the lowest funding from the state of Iowa that many of us have ever seen in public education. And I can tell you, I grew up in Iowa. We chose to raise our children in Iowa. We chose for them to go to public education in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. have committed to volunteer to be on the board to try and make a difference for all kids. And as we start to look at these challenges in the budgets, it became very clear, and Steve Graham, who he loves to call himself the bean counter, but he is awesome. I mean, for years since I've been on the board and beyond, this district has a financial record, awards nationally. We have outside auditors come in and look. So I trust the data that the auditors and Steve Graham are sharing with us tonight. And it was clear that on the trend line, we were going to come up against a real serious wall in just a few years. And so we need to start making some decisions about the facilities themselves. We also then told Dr. Buck, you need to start having this be a conversation based on this data with the community and the stakeholder group. This is going to take a lot of time. We talked about how that might work best. And so we have people from the school district, teachers who are parents, administrators, parents, all kinds of different folks from the school district. The majority of the group though, that we tasked with this are people from a variety of places in the community, business people, nonprofit organizations, just a variety of people to help us with this. And it was a long, tedious sort of process, but they garnered a lot of information, and I won't go into all of that. But what we said in the end is, give us an idea of where we can go in the next number of years, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. Let's get this conversation started so that we don't wait another 20 years before these buildings are all falling down and we don't have adequate facilities at all. Let's get this conversation started. So that was kind of the impetus that got this underway, and that's the direction we gave to our superintendent, Dr. Buck.
Why don't we go to the next slide, Justin? Thank you very much. My name is Steve Graham. It's hard to believe it's my 21st year as CFO with the Cedar Rapids School District. I love this town. I love our district. I'm a native Cedar Rapidian, born and raised here in town, a graduate of Jefferson High School. I was a Taft Tiger. A year after Taft was a brand new middle school. At that time it was called a junior high school. So at any rate, I'm very lucky to have the position that I have and have held for the last 21 years now. So the first graph that you see there is a reality, and it may be a little bit dramatic when you look at the red line going down from the northwest to the southeast as you look at that graph from left to right, but it's designed to provide a glaring reality check here on what is happening with our PEPL fund. PEPL, what is that? PEPL is Physical Plant and Equipment Levy. These are resources that are designed for specific brick and mortar projects. We have PEPL Promise. Thank you very much, the voters of Cedar Rapids, to give us an expansion and increase in our overall PEPL levy. But we still have significant needs that outstrip the actual PEPL resources coming in. But that red bar, that red line, is demonstrating the reduction of reserves over this time continuum, and we actually hit the wall about fiscal 23-24 when our $7.5 million reserve level of PEPL is extinguished. And the reason for that is because of a growing trend towards unanticipated surprises with our aging infrastructure. Hoover Elementary, for example, had a boiler replacement that we didn't plan for, but when it comes to the safety of our students, it is paramount that we provide for those essential safety services. So we go to the next slide, and this is a lineup of the actual costs, and these costs have been evolving over time. We've been in this business for quite a long time in terms of planning for the reinvestment of our infrastructure. So we go back, and the blue colors represent dollars by building for what's the basic brick and mortar, the roof repair, it's the windows, it's the carpet, it's the doors, it's the sidewalks and asphalt. It's the basic stuff of our needs for our 21 elementary buildings. And then we have those, the color that are green, that are what we call our leadership projects, which emerged from a 2013 study that we had done, work that we had done for facility master planning, and work with Shai Pattery to take these emerging concepts like safe, secure entryways and parking that works well between buses and vehicular traffic, and having access to our libraries and community spaces. These ideas emerged from that plan, and we've quantified those, and they are included in our overall $223 million cost associated with our existing 21 elementary buildings. Then, if you go to the next slide, we see very much the same information, but now we have this relative to each individual school size, because school size varies. So now we have everybody on the same, every elementary school on the same playing field. And you see that line, that vertical red line, that is a 50% line. And you can see the vast majority of our elementary schools go over that line, and which essentially means that it will take more than 50% of the value of our buildings to replace them, or the reinvestment is greater than 50% of the actual replacement cost of the buildings. It's time to be thinking about what it is that we're doing, whether we continue to repair and maintain 21 elementary buildings or look at building a new investment in a new facility. So the next is an open enrollment. We've been tracking this since 1991. Cedar Rapids Schools is a net exporter of students to other school districts, particularly Linn-Mar, Marion, College Community, Albernet, the contiguous schools of the Cedar Rapids area. We have a net loss of 910 students for the most current fiscal period, and this is significant resource drain from the school district's general operating fund. So we have about $6.5 million net expense for tuition that we pay to other schools because we are losing students. And these students are just leaving us from the fringes of our school district. They're leaving us from a multitude representing all areas of the school system. So the next slide is a work, this is representation work of RSP and Associates. They have been trending and predicting our enrollment for all three levels, elementary, middle, and high school, with a 98% accuracy rate, and they've proven this time and time again with us in other schools that they're working with. But you can see that our elementary numbers are in that 7,200 to 7,300 range, predicted fairly flatlined over the next 5 years in that prediction model. And I think that is it.
All right, so the next slide talks about our milestones and how did we get to where we are. So I just want to start, I think I speak for the entire committee. If we didn't have to make this choice to be fiscally responsible, we wouldn't. We would choose to keep all 30 schools and keep them as they are and upgrade them, but that's not what it appears that we can do. We started our focus on trying to upgrade all 30 schools, and we realized really quickly we don't have the funds to do that. So we focused mostly on our elementary schools, and the biggest reason for that is because they have the greatest need when it comes to cost to repair. We've already invested quite a bit of money in our middle schools and high schools from what we've seen from the district's past record as far as geothermal and lots of upgrades for safety. So that's really why we focused on our elementary schools initially. The next thing on here says, why did we choose the 600 student ideal for our capacity? And we really chose this as our sweet spot because there are a lot of benefits. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, in like 2 slides. We've got a whole list of those reasons. But really that's what the committee came to as our sweet spot, was 600 students. And then lastly, it says, how do we plan to reinvest in our community? Our overall goal is that we really want to make these buildings more community accessible, and we hope that each building can be tailored to the neighborhoods around them and provide resources for those facilities, or for those people living, the Cedar Rapidians living in those areas. We'll go to the next slide, Jason. So basically, our committee looked at a ton of data. We've met for the last 18 months. We looked at heat maps, which is on the slide there, that tells us how many students are actually residing around the current buildings. We looked at actual reside and enrollment data. We also looked at cost estimates to update and maintain, which Steve kind of hit on. And we also looked at the facility size as well as land mass, what we can accommodate larger buildings on. And it quickly became apparent that some buildings look like they have really large sites and we can build a nice big building on it, but looks can be seating when we looked at the actual ownership that Cedar Rapids has in those land spaces. All right, so we get this question every time we go to a meeting, why do we feel 600 students is the best for our school? And the reason is, one, it's most efficient. We've looked at lots of data that's going to show us we can maintain these buildings and be more efficient running them from a staff standpoint. The biggest selling point for me personally, I'm going to be honest, on the committee was we can get the students access to the programs that they're losing out on right now. Full-time specials, music, art, gym, where those teachers will actually get to know your kids better. Right now we have teachers that are sharing among buildings and they really don't know the students the way we hope they would. Another big selling point for me was that improved spaces and better collaboration among our teachers is really going to benefit your kids in the fact that I hope that when we have a group of kids that is struggling in one area or excelling in one area, those teachers can collaborate and pull those kids together to focus on the things they need to focus on when we have more students there in those grade levels. The other thing is we looked at 600 student buildings around us in surrounding districts as well as Kansas City, and it quickly became apparent that you can build a building that accommodates 600 students that really doesn't feel like there are 600 students there. The kids still feel like they're individuals. And then the tiers would be our next slide, Justin. One more, we were going to skip this one. The tiers, so when we look at the tier system, we did look at several different proposals, and this is the one the committee landed on. We tried to hit schools that would be equal in the attendance areas of the high schools so that we're not focusing on one area over the other in each of the tiers. And we also tried to look at the schools that have the most need first. The tiers are really designed to be flexible, so over time, if a need arises in a school that's not in that tier, we can move things around. That's really going to be up to the school board, but that's what our goal was with the tiered systems.
Yeah, so there are a few things happening in this next slide. One of them is to acknowledge this plan has been in front of the board informally over the last 16 or so months. And one of the indications they gave is their first preference is that we consider the extension of the SAVE as the funding stream for this work. So if you're familiar with the SAVE is the statewide penny. It started as lost and became silo, now SAVE. Essentially the same uses as sort of what it was originally designed for. So one is to acknowledge that the informal guidance has been potential extension of the SAVE is set to expire in 2029. So we would be advocating the legislature for an extension to 2049, and that would be a top 3 priority for the majority of schools, school districts in the state. The other thing that this is indicating and showing you is because of the way that SAVE funding would work, if approved in this session, we have access to about $212 million on July 1st, 2020. So the first time that there would be shovels in the ground relative to any of these projects, depending on what may ultimately be approved by the board, is July 1st, 2020. So that summer we would begin our first project. And what this is intended to show them is one school a year over the ensuing 13 or so years. The other thing this is intended to show, much like Shelley already mentioned, is a recognition by the committee that this needs to be segmented work. So work through a tier, pause and make sure that the dynamics of Cedar Rapids haven't substantively changed. If they have changed, major player comes to town. Other examples I'm not doing well off the top of my head. Would that lead to a course correction in this plan? So recognition by the committee that there needs to be expected intermittent checkpoints along the way about the implementation of the plan, and we've heard similar discussion from the board before taking. With that, I think we're ready for questions.
Okay. Well, I think one question that's on a lot of folks' mind is, what exactly is going to happen on Monday? Is there going to be a school board vote on this plan? Is the vote going to be tabled or delayed? What's the read on that at this point?
So Dr. Buck and I and others on the board have talked about the agenda for next Monday night, and at this point, there will be a vote that will be placed on the agenda as a holding spot. The board will have more discussion as much as is needed. The majority of the board, if they feel we want to continue conversations, that there's new information out there based on what we're hearing tonight, what we've been hearing over the last number of days and weeks, we will certainly extend that. There's not anything on our agenda that says we need to vote on Monday for sure. But again, if there's not new information out there, we've been in this process for, as Nancy said, starting in 2012. We've had 18 months with approximately 5 public presentations. We've talked to hundreds of people, many organizations. We've extended this process by about 4 months from the original schedule that we had. So again, we're willing to extend it if we need to extend it. I will say that whenever the board decides to vote on this proposed plan or a modified plan or whatever, the bottom line right now is that what Steve Graham talked about, the finances that are coming in, 7 years of historically low increases to the public K-12 system in Iowa. We're elected, we're volunteers, but we're elected with the fiduciary responsibility to live within our means, just like most of us as families are. But we have legal obligations to do that. And so when our CFO is telling us, and all the indicators from auditors on the outside are saying in about 2024 you're going to run into this wall, well, we have to take that pretty serious and figure out how we're going to live within our means. These funds that we have are separate funds. What we spend on facilities cannot be used to help pay for teachers or for special media, books, and some of those things. This is just for facilities. Okay, so we sort of had that question. As we look at this, and I think Dr. Buck had mentioned this as well, huge consideration has been where will the money come from to do this? We know that we're going to eventually hit a wall on the money. Number one, we heard loud and clear since 2012 that this community is not really excited about raising property taxes anymore. The state had cut back on corporate taxes. There were backfills that were supposed to happen. We're starting to see, I think, at the state level some of the consequences of that. I know there's some city council folks in the audience and maybe some county folks. They're going to be dealing with some really hard decisions themselves soon. We're trying to get this so that we can use that penny sales tax without raising property taxes. Because the other factor that's going to happen here in Cedar Rapids, and I probably won't be on the board when any of this happens, but thinking 2015 or 15 years from now, those middle schools, we've got some really old infrastructure, we've got some newer ones. Those are going to need updated as well. That's going to be probably a bond vote at some point. Those high schools that we just spent $30-some million on a piece trying to get geothermal, new lighting, extra panes of glass, and all kinds of amenities for the students, those facilities are also eventually going to need upgraded. This is sort of a constant process, just like with your home. If you don't keep the maintenance up, you run into some major problems, and we're just sort of at that point right now. So again, to answer the question, the vote, there will be a placeholder for a vote. There will be plenty of time for discussion. We invite more of the public to come to our meeting on Monday night. Everybody has up to 5 minutes to address the board with concerns, new information. It is not an interactive session per Iowa code, so we're not doing that. But we are willing. We were at Kenwood Elementary, many of us last night, for about 3 hours. A number of people came to that, and I see some in the audience. We had great conversations. And again, our information is on the website. Feel free to email any of us that are on the board. Dr. Buck's email is on there, and we'll help you out, get what we can to you. So.
One of the questions, when you are looking at funding through SAVE and there's not resolution to whether that's going to get approved by lawmakers this session, what does voting now gain the district from this standpoint? Would there be ways to move forward where you take time gather more information, present to the community, but move forward with design plans or other pieces? Can you take us through why now?
Well, I think, and Dr. Buck or Steve jumped in, but the first dirt isn't going to be dug in the ground. We're not going to dig any dirt for a couple of years yet, and we've gathered a lot of information. There's still a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of conversations. No matter what we choose to do, whether it's through the SAVE or if we had to take this information and go out for a bond vote and go out and ask to raise property taxes to do some of this work, it's going to take some time to do that. So we would rather, knowing where we're at in this process, get this framework in place. When we vote on this, whenever that is, it is a framework. It goes out for 15 years. As Dr. Buck and Steve have mentioned, there are phases involved with this. So the first 2 new buildings and 1 closure would happen, and then there would be a pause. And this pause will be in board policy. It will be in the resolution that we vote on whenever we vote. And it will say, we're going to just stop here for a second, as Dr. Buck had mentioned. We're going to look, did the community get what they expected from what we promised? Are these buildings meeting the needs of the students, the neighbors, the families, the teachers, all of those involved, those stakeholders? So we're going to take a little bit of that pause and then say, okay, we could do this better. And if we can do it better, we'll do that. Our intention, and working closely with the city, in fact, it'll be in the resolution, but we're working on a memorandum of understanding with the city, what it means for us moving forward, having city involvement, nonprofit involvement, neighbors involvement, staff involvement. What is it that's best for your neighborhood? And that's all 21 elementary schools, all right? So if we're closing, repurposing, or building new on site, that area is going to have a conversation about what you want in that area.
So to clarify, it sounds like the vote is going to be on phase 1, or is that not correct?
No, the vote is on the full framework, knowing that changes, I mean, as Dr. Buck said, we could get a great new employer in town that brings in several thousand new families. And so after phase 1, we might say, boy, it really looks like there's a whole bunch of new housing that's going in and families moving into this district. So in phase 2, which is like the 5 to 10 year mark, we're going to actually need to build more schools. Or God forbid, something happens and we have some other incident that happens and we lose more families. We might say we actually need to pull back a little bit on this.
So just to clarify, so you've got a list of 8 schools in this framework slated for closure. You've got a list of 10 new facilities, 3 remodeled facilities. So those lists could conceivably change because of future board decisions. I mean, that's...
So we're not arrogant enough to think that we are all knowing for 15 years out. Our consultants are really good for about maybe 3 to 5 years in that 98% or so accuracy. They've proven that not just in our district, but many districts in Iowa and around the Midwest. And so what we know and what we will do and why we're taking these in phases is, again, if there are changes in years 5 and beyond or so, we're willing to go back and have those conversations. At every step along the way, every one of these 21 elementary neighborhoods and the city and nonprofits, etc., are going to have organized conversations. So what we do in one neighborhood certainly isn't and doesn't have to be what we do in another area, whether it's, again, closing or staying open. So yes, there could be changes further down the plan here.
So can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Maybe just one additional. At our board meeting a week ago, Monday night, one of our committee members, Phil Lawson, he was up there in the work session, and one of the things he did a nice job of is delineating this idea of a framework and programming. So people sort of want to jump into all this programming conversation, which I completely understand because that's where the details are. And at the same time, what we're trying to make happen here is let's vision cast a strategic plan for elementary facilities for the next 15 or 20 years in Cedar Rapids. Board looks at approving that framework with the recognition that there's likely need for course correction along the way as the dynamics potentially change in our community. And one of the reasons we know that the board is committed to the concept of potential course correction is, as John has noted, in the board packet on Monday night, there will be a procedure in the board, in front of the board, that they have asked for to vote on that talks about at least every 5 years going forward, we need to do additional facility planning work. So the board, this board, and I'm confident future boards will desire those opportunities and expectations within that procedure for the recognition that this is a long-term strategic plan.
So you mentioned this, the process going forward, where you're going to have city cooperation, you're going to have neighborhood collaboration on, and this is on the repurposing of buildings that are closing, and also the building new structures. What's that process going to look like? You had a committee process previously that had some open meetings, but also had a lot of closed sessions. Is this going to be a more public process, a more transparent process? Is it going to be open to anyone who wants to have a voice in that process going forward as these plans take shape?
Yes. Our intent is that they be very much open and very public, so we will invite the staff. So the first school, if the framework gets underway, the school that is immediately most in need, and it's a tier 1 school, is Coolidge. So what we would envision is going to Coolidge and beginning conversations with people that live there now and people with kids that may eventually go there. City folks, anybody that would like to engage and dream a little bit about what the future of the new Coolidge can be, we absolutely will want to engage folks in those experiences.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the dreaming part, the opportunity part in this plan, although it's difficult to close schools or repurpose schools, the opportunities for our community and kids are also really pretty great. I've gone down and looked at and talked to people in the Aldine School District down in the Houston area. They have a community college that has classes that they teach the adults, parents, that maybe it's a very low income area. Some of the parents didn't have great experiences in their K-12 life, they've struggled in their jobs. So these folks are in the library or media center on weekends and evenings. They have a separate entrance, they've got the computers there, they've got staff from the community college. Down the other hallway that also has separate public access is a gymnasium, which when we went and looked at Linn-Mar, College Community, and others, the elementary gymnasiums are about 3 times larger than what our elementary gymnasiums are right now. They have the cafeteria across the hallway. And so you've got the students of these parents that are also learning, getting support. So the Boys and Girls Clubs, the after school types of programs, the recreational activities, the arts programs are also going on evenings and weekends, so multi-purposes. I think about back after the flood of 2008, some of the things potentially closing Harrison, and we listened, we worked with the city. Mayor Corbett was very instrumental in that. Mary Meisterling, who was on our board at the time, I believe, Mary, you were president at the time. We worked collaboratively together and said, there's a need, the time check recreational facility is wiped out. What are we going to do? And I know there's a whole lot of debate. We agreed this would be a great partnership. We can have a benefit to the Cedar Rapids school kids and our staff when they teach during the day in a much nicer recreation facility. And on nights and weekends, the community gets a brand new, great space at relatively little cost. So overall savings for the taxpayers was lower. The costs were lower, and the benefit was greater for both. So those are the kinds of things that maybe we can start dreaming about just a little bit. We can't do that with 21 elementaries right now and get to where we need to be. So.
This is a little bit of a process question, but and it's a little bit hypothetical at the same time. John, you had mentioned that the plan is to fund this through SAVE revenue, which is not been extended at this point in time, and you have a timeline to start construction in 2020. What do you do if you don't get that SAVE money? And at what point are you going to examine, has there been discussion yet about other funding streams?
Yeah, well, and Steve, you can jump in. There's really only one other funding stream that I can tell you, and it was definitely considered, and that's raising property taxes and taking it to a bond vote. And so this community, the community that I've been part of for 30 years now, has been very supportive of these sorts of things in the past, and we all appreciate that. We benefit from this new library building and other public buildings. But it would mean raising taxes. And Steve, I think you have an estimate of what it would mean on, maybe $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 house to do what we're trying to do.
I don't think anybody likes the idea of having a local property tax increase. And the Cedar Rapids schools have got the third lowest levy rate of the 11 schools in Lynn County. We take great pride in that. And so our preference would be to fund our projects with the local option or the state fund. But it could be a couple of dollars on the levy rate, which would have an impact on the residential property owner, the commercial property owner, etc. I think a point I want to make is this. We're at a tipping point in our community. Hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have a better sense, if you don't already, of the importance of this conversation. We will spend significant resources regardless of what we do going forward, whether we maintain the existing 21 elementary schools or we do something different, do something bold. And this idea around a 600 elementary school building isn't coincidence. It is not coincidence at all. It's around the trips that we have taken, the tours that we've seen. We've walked through elementary buildings to see how in the interiors of these spaces are wonderful, they're beautiful, they have wonderful opportunity for our students. They don't feel like a large elementary building. And yes, I'm a bean counter. That's what I'm hired to do. I'm here to watch the finances of the school district and take great pride in that. But I also recognize that it isn't the most important thing. In fact, it really is something that is important, but it sort of takes a second and third place to other more important things like the quality instructional program of our system for our students. But it is a reality check here. If we continue on with what we're doing right now, we will be eventually starved for operating resources. And having fewer, larger elementary buildings provides a breathing space for our school system, its operating fund, because of the efficiencies of running larger, fewer elementary buildings. It is a reality. We are, as President Lamberty said earlier, we have gone through painfully 7 consecutive years of budget reductions in our school district. It is a reality, and when we go through budget reductions, we're reducing staff. That is where we spend the vast majority of our operating fund resources in staff, teaching staff, which puts pressure on class sizes. Having fewer, larger elementary buildings can save the district every year $3 million, and those resources are precious and can be reinvested to improve the quality of instruction and improve our sustainability for the long term. So hopefully we're painting a picture to you tonight about the urgency of considering something new and different. It's sort of you can pay me now or you can pay me later. It isn't a choice of whether or not we're going to save tax dollars, whether it's a property tax, or save resources by not doing anything, because the reality is we're going to be spending pretty much the same amount of money whether we do something or we do nothing. So I apologize for being long.
And I just want to add, related to the SAVE fund, if it doesn't happen, we've been working on this, and this school districts across Iowa have been working on this for years. This is very important to us. It's one of the only major resources that we have consistently to invest in our facilities and to invest in technology and a few other minor things at this point. The state took that over. Lynn County, all the other 99 counties voted for this unanimously. The state saw that and they took the program over, which is fine. We actually, in Lynn County, because we're a larger urban area with lots of property and companies, we're actually kind of losing in that whole deal, I think. But irregardless of that, we have bipartisan support. We have Representative Ashley Hinson on the Republican side of the House who is championing the bill that will push the extension of SAVE. We have unanimous support from the legislators that we talked across the aisle on this. Here, the situation, if you watch the news, thank you news media, you see the discussions. There's not very much new money right now. In fact, public higher education is going to take a mid-year cut, as are many other services. Next year's fiscal estimates are not looking great, and so we're looking at likely no or little, maybe 1% or so for Lucky. New money for K-12 public school. That doesn't even cover all the inflationary things that we need to cover. So when Steve says it's dire, it really is. And again, trying to get this done is a huge priority for us and many other districts. But again, if it doesn't happen, we're going to, at some point, use all this data, use all this feedback, continue having conversations about it with all of you and others, and figure out, okay, are we ready? What do you all want to do in terms of raising property taxes? Are you all, as citizens, ready to do that?
And a gentle reminder, we got a lot of questions, so everybody can sort of breathe. That's all I ask. So you mentioned the open enrollment gap. I've got several questions from readers who are basically boiled down into two questions. One, what does the district know about why students are leaving? And number two, how do you know that new facilities are going to address that issue?
Yes, I would have to speak to that. We've done a review of our open enrollment out data. We've contacted the three districts that receive the largest numbers of our students are Marion Independent, the former Marion Homeschool, Limar, and College Community. So I say that to say this. We've pulled those data together and we've looked at the demographics of the students that are leaving our school district. And one of the things we found is there's two statistically significant findings, which is important because that means they're likely not random events. One of the things that's true of the attributes of the children that are leaving is they're disproportionately white. The other attribute of the students that are leaving that's significantly disproportionate when compared to the rest of our kids is status in free and reduced lunch rate. And they overwhelmingly are students from families who are not participating in free and reduced lunch. So what we know is the students that are leaving are disproportionately white and disproportionately not free and reduced lunch. So I will speak to this from a different perspective because I have a different life experience related to all this. Some of you may know I worked for 10 years in Waukee Community School District. If you're not familiar with Waukee, Waukee is the fastest growing community school district in the state. Grows about 600 students a year, and they're still the fastest growing. So as a person that was on the receiving end of students leaving core urban areas, the three things that people frequently talk to me about, the most frequent things those people talk to me about is they came to Waukee, open enrolling in and moving there as fast as they could. The first one they talked about is academics. So when they would look at the academic records of the schools that they choose to go to, and they looked at the academic record of Waukee, the academic record of Waukee held up extremely well against basically anybody in the Des Moines metro. The second thing that they frequently talked about is they were concerned about student discipline and student behavior in classrooms for the districts that they were leaving. So they talked about academic performance, they talked about student behavior in classrooms, and the third thing they talked about was facilities. The facilities, there's an effect that happens with facilities, and I oftentimes call it the halo effect. And the halo effect with the facilities was when you pulled up to a facility and everything was new, there was an assumption that what was going on in those schools was also sort of in line with what they saw on the outside of those schools. So when you start to look at our context, if you look at, and we can discuss the finer points of the things I'm going to say here, but I'm supposed to be brief, which I respect. The first one is you look at the academic performance of the college community in Linn-Mar. College community, their academic performance is higher than ours on essentially every measure. Linn-Mar's results are substantively higher on essentially every measure. If you were to ask people about the increasing complexity of behavior that they observe in schools, I think it would be generally regarded that there's a difference in the complexity of the behaviors that we observe in schools in Cedar Rapids when compared to our neighbors in both Linn-Mar and College. And if you had an opportunity to visit their facilities are in very different shape from the facilities that we have in front of us. So the question, I think, is related to open enrollment. And so I'll just tell you that's my life experience and the experience and the conversations I've had many times.
The other point with open enrollment, and Dr. Buck, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a state form that to open enroll, families have to fill out. We as a district can't go in and alter that state document. We can ask students, and we've done this, ask them to respond to a survey, but they only have to do that if they want to. So the response rate has been very, very low, and this was from a couple of years ago. But again, there's a ton of anecdotal information that we can go back and look at. Number of realtors, Dr. Buck meets with the realtors in town on at least an annual basis. And this is a common theme when new families are coming into the community. Some families, and it's not across the board, some families love historic neighborhoods and they're coming in jobs that it's more reasonable, they get more bang for their buck in some of our Cedar Rapids neighborhoods, or they love the New Boat area and they want kind of that new hip housing or whatever it is. But we also have a lot that are pushing towards suburban areas that are outside of the metro area. The other thing I just want to say is that our school district is really more than just Cedar Rapids, although Cedar Rapids as a city is part of it. The College Community School District comes only about a block or two south of Grant Elementary, if you know where that's at, on the southwest side. And the southwest side Target store, right just around that area is the borderline for College Community. All of that's College Community into Cedar Rapids. Linn-Mar, Bowman Woods, all that area, that's College, or that's Linn-Mar area, right? So Cedar Rapids goes Palo, we've got all of Palo, we've got all of Hiawatha, we've got some of Robbins. We've got a huge swath of Linn County all the way up to Benton County line and County Home Road. So lots and lots of other things that are going on out there. And again, on the horizon, when we look at the 15-year horizon, lots of unknowns. The Highway 100 extension, for instance, we don't know what's going to happen out there. Up on Tower Terrace Road, we don't know what's going to happen for sure up there. All these things are kind of in play at the same time. So.
I wanted to jump a little bit to the brick and mortar types of questions because we've got a whole host of those that have come in. And one of the questions that we have several variations on from the audience and from readers is when you talk about modernizing schools, what's missing from the types of schools that we have? Then we also have kind of a part two to that. The concept of community hub is listed in some of the presentation materials. When you're talking to the city and you're talking to, what is the community hub concept and what are you really working to try and reach for that?
I'd like to take the first part of that question. I think what's missing, I'm thinking, well, in a typical day or a typical week, every week, I'll be going through one building or another, and we're always monitoring our quality and safety of our interior spaces for our students. It's paramount that we provide safe facilities. But we have aging facilities, and we have indoor air quality concerns that occasionally occur that we address, whether it is a cooling on one side of a room that's 5 degrees cooler on one side than it is on the other, or perhaps a bit of a draft that we experience, or we have a pipe that bursts, so we've got a leaky pipe that's staining ceiling tile. These are nuisance kinds of things, but one after the next, they begin to add up over time. So we have a constant, we're vigilant to look at what's going on in our facilities, to make those quick fixes on the fly, to replace those ceiling tile, to glue that carpeting down, to fix that crack in the sidewalk so that someone doesn't trip over it, to make sure that the boilers are not going to be failing us before winter season because they're maybe 15 years old and we're thinking maybe we can stretch and get 3 or 4 more years out of this boiler if we invest dollars by cleaning it and giving it a new chemical treatment. And I can go on and on and on. These are the things that you maybe can relate to with an old truck or an aging home of your own that you have to fix these things that drive you crazy. So what's different about our facilities compared to our new facilities of our neighbors around the metro area? Well, I can tell you this, we're spending a lot more time being vigilant around keeping our students safe because of those aging facilities.
I'd just like to add, as a committee member, we had lots of discussions, and when we went to the other schools, you could see it, the collaboration. And when we talk about having 4 sections in each school, that means you're going to have 4 first grade, 4 second grade, 4 third grade teachers. In some of our schools, we have 1 or 2 of those teachers. It's really hard to get that collaboration going. On top of that, when you have that many students, you really can't hold them all together. There's no place in our buildings to bring 2 or 3 classes together except for the gym or the cafeteria. These new buildings, the plans that we kind of looked at, the schools that we visited, show us that there are spaces that would allow for that. We can bring larger groups of students together, work on them, or work with them on areas that they really need to focus on. And just for example, Roosevelt Middle School, my daughter did the option program there, and they really implemented that amazingly. They had 3 classes. They would pull students together to focus on areas they needed or focus on areas they were excelling. We hope that these new buildings will allow for those kinds of things. We just can't do that in our schools now. On top of those basic needs that Steve talks about. You talk to teachers who say kids are wearing winter coats when they're trying to study, or you talk to teachers who say, I was teaching and the pipe burst in the back of the classroom, we had to evacuate the class. It's really unfortunate that our kids are being exposed to those types of things.
I'll just say that the other part of this is when we tour some of the other facilities, one, they're much more accessible. So the hallways are much wider. So number one, so if you've got a child in a wheelchair or multiple children moving at the same time in different classes, much easier to navigate. We also have the shared spaces in the newer facilities where teachers, maybe one group of students is focused on one project and another, they can go out into that central area and use those spaces. These have huge advantage. Right now, if you go into many of our elementaries, a student who's receiving individual instruction is with a volunteer or a teacher or a para sitting out in the hallways. These facilities have places for those sorts of things. And safety. The main office is in the front, and people have to come through the main office instead of going through a building where the office is separate. So there's safety factors involved as well. And again, the board isn't committed to one exact plan for each of these buildings. There are some very historic buildings that we're looking at, and those will be much different situations than, say, looking at a clean slate, empty lot.
So I just want to say one other thing. I appreciate what we're hearing because this is a blending of the actual facilities. So they're better lit, they have larger classrooms, they have larger gym spaces, sort of all of those things. Modernized HVAC, et cetera, et cetera. That's an important part. What they also don't have is 4-person professional learning communities with four teachers in a section who have the opportunity to work closely together to provide even better learning experiences for all kids by collaborating with one another. What they also don't have is what often happens is if you're a student in a low incident population in Cedar Rapids schools right now, it's far more likely that you don't go to your home school than that you actually go to your home school. So one of the things that we would see in these schools is children that live in their geographic boundary would actually attend the school that was intended for them to attend. I've had the privilege to be in front of 600 elementary school teachers over the last few days. The first comment I heard when we opened up the floor for teachers to give comments and questions was, I am so excited about this plan. She's a severe and profound teacher at one of our schools. I cannot wait to build schools with every child in mind. So that's what these schools have. And I just want to talk about one other thing. Well, I got the mic and I got a second because you haven't given me the other thing they have is we care about class size in Cedar Rapids schools. We care about it so much we invest in it. And the way we invest in it is this. We have benchmarks for kids. We expect 21 kids to be our benchmark for kindergarten. We expect 23 kids to be our benchmark for first and second grade. We expect our benchmark in grades 3, 4, and 5 to be 25 students. When I tell our teachers, and guess what? Here's the good news. We actually invested in that. If you take all of the kindergarten kids in Cedar Rapids divided by all the kindergarten teachers, I'm not talking Title I and other great supports for our classrooms, straight up division, you get the number 21. When you do the same thing in first grade, you get 23. Second grade, 23. Within 1/10. Within 1/10. When I tell teachers that, how do teachers react? Much like some of you in the crowd are reacting right now. They shake their heads and they don't believe it. And you know why they shake their heads and don't believe it? Because that's not how they experience it in Cedar Rapids schools. By having fewer, smaller elementaries, with as few as one section, but oftentimes 2 sections, when 4 or 5 kids come into the grade level, it substantially changes the class size in a micro way of those schools. And then we have parents coming to the board meeting, which they should, and they're saying things like, I'm worried about my class size at X elementary and X grade level. The challenge with that is we already invested the money in the class size. And we've heard there are challenges related to funding. So then we want to try to honor that class size with recognition that part of what's driving that is the very size of our schools. They're part of what's driving that. So I say that, it's important to say that a lot of the time. We care about class size, we invest in class size, and one of the things that happens with schools of these sizes is we're more likely to even out section size and get the class size we desire district-wide.
So I don't think we addressed the community hub
Oh.
question, so we'll just address that real quick. The vision from our committee is that we have community hub conversations in those neighborhoods where the input is brought in from the public that says, this is what we want in our school. That's what we talk about when we talk about community hub. What do you want in the school that's going to be in your area, your neighborhood? What will best serve the needs of your area? That's what we talk about with community hubs.
And an opportunity to amplify tax dollars. So where there are natural intersections that we're putting in larger gymnasium. If you've been to the Northwest Rec Center, there's also a kitchen on that and some meeting space. So are there going to be opportunities to intersect with the city and or nonprofits and amplify these buildings in a way that's helpful throughout the community that maybe doesn't exist in the smaller schools that exist there?
I think the next question kind of builds on what we were just talking about, but what has the district done to kind of consider the neighborhood impacts for the neighborhoods where schools would be closed? You know, have you looked at some of the different data from the economics, property values, the concerns around that? There are a lot of questions, particularly around that closure.
I think that there's a general belief, and frankly, I was one of those that would probably admit that I was one of the believers that in the absence of an elementary school that is removed from a neighborhood, or what has been defined as a neighborhood historically, that property values will decline. That's a very natural, normal belief. And frankly, until we saw data that came from Rob Schwartz with RSP that showed a 5-year period of time around 2 schools. One school, Polk Elementary, that was repurposed, but closed as an elementary, a traditional elementary building. And then Monroe Elementary, that was our kindergarten elementary attendance center in the southeast quadrant. These 2 elementaries that were closed were looked at, and the property values around, a mile radius around each of these buildings. And what they found out was really quite interesting. Number one, the aggregate of Cedar Rapids, this bastion of economic prosperity that we see as eastern Iowa's jewel, is actually a slow tax-based growth community. In fact, for Cedar Rapids Community Schools, our rate of growth has been at sub 2% per year for the last 10 years. It has been so low that the average taxable value per student in Cedar Rapids is now below the statewide average, which is shocking when you think about Cedar Rapids. This is my home. This is a strong community. But that's a large aggregate picture. Now let's focus on Monroe and Polk. The property values of those properties, residential properties, commercial properties, but particularly residential properties around these 2 elementary buildings, they mimicked the same slow rate of growth in the aggregate of the greater Cedar Rapids metro area, or more specifically, the Cedar Rapids Community School District. So the data is very clear. The parallel between the growth of property on those 2 close schools is evidence that there really hasn't been a decline in the value of property as a result of those buildings that were closed. There's more to the question, but I think I'm getting the time here, so I think I'm going to stop for another opportunity.
So that's the property value data. We've got lots of questions that are sort of, what other sort of data did the committee or the district look at with regard to, what closing a school does to stabilizing a neighborhood? I've had concerns about, what are the implications for public safety, all sorts of just, they run the gamut.
I know that Dr. Buck can speak very, very well to the public safety area, but what I'm going to speak to is this idea about where these schools are located from the work of the committee. And as a member of the committee, I can speak just from my experiences. initially when we began to look at where we would site elementary schools, fewer larger elementary schools in our community, initially we began looking around the fringes thinking, well, you know, we've got Linn-Mar and College and Marion schools on our perimeter. This might be a likely place for the Cedar Rapids schools to begin thinking about siting elementaries. But actually, that was fairly short-lived. We began thinking about, we have 21 elementary sites with 21 land masses, and we began looking at where are the larger elementary campus sites, where are the best accessibility locations in our 21 elementary buildings, where is the greatest need, the highest expenditure to maintain an existing elementary infrastructure, in a variety of other metrics. But where we landed with that was reinvesting in our inner city. You'll see that we have elementary sited in the inner city of Cedar Rapids. And so I think I'm going to just stop there. In terms of the crime, maybe Dr. Buck can talk about that issue.
Yeah, so really quick on the crime conversation. One of the things I would invite you to do, you can go on there's a website, and you can actually look at real-time data related to crime in Cedar Rapids. So I believe I'm going to say this correctly. Over the last several years, there's been a general trend of about even property crime, sort of Cedar Rapids wide, but a decrease in violent crime, or a trend of decrease in violent crime in Cedar Rapids over the last several years. So the reason the website is important, and I invite you to go take a look at the website, you can actually go take a look at property and other crime distributed across Cedar Rapids on that website. You can look at in the last week, in the last 3 months, I don't know what the exact, or 6 months, I think you can go out. So one of the things you see, you'll notice if you get in there, if you were to draw a 4-quadrant box that said where there are schools, where there are not schools, where is there more crime and where there's less crime, what you will see, I believe, if you go and take a look at that is, there is significant amount of crime near some of our schools. There is crime that is not near our schools. There is no crime near schools. There is no crime not near schools. So what you likely will observe in that is there are probably factors other than the location of an elementary school that impact where crime occurs in our city. So we did look at that. We did try to take and sort of understand what that is, and we believe that there's probably factors beyond location of an elementary that impact where crimes occur in Cedar Rapids.
I think one of the other things related to that the board has heard about over the last few months is that you're going to close 8 schools, and you're just going to board them up, and this is going to be urban blight. The school district's been around since 1860 roughly. There have been dozens of buildings that have been built, closed, torn down, repurposed, moved, all kinds of things opened and closed and reopened again. Those old timers in the audience, you know exactly what that is. You can go out there. We've got some great historians in Cedar Rapids that can help show you that information. But as far as I know, from what I can see, and definitely in the last few decades, we haven't let any buildings that have been repurposed or closed for the schools just sit vacant and not try to work with the city or others to find a new purpose for those. So again, the school district doesn't have that history, and we don't want that to happen. We will work with every neighborhood, 21 of them, in every one of those elementary areas, to find out what that neighborhood, what the city and others want. We've built a great relationship with the City of Cedar Rapids Police Department. See Councilwoman Susie Weinocht out in the audience, who I think you're chair of the Public Safety and Youth Services Committee, if I'm not mistaken. We have actually worked together. We have programs that the city has helped sponsor in our schools. We've got resource officers in some of our schools. We've built other programs with our schools and activities with the city. We have actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Susie, but I think the overall youth crime rate is actually down. So we're proud of that, and we'll continue to work on that in all of these areas.
You have several kind of variations on the, increasing the size of the attendance centers in the schools. Won't that result in differences or larger busing costs, more students being bused? And how does that offset where we are today?
That's a really interesting question. It's a very timely one too, actually. We right now have met through a conference call, Dr. Buck and myself, and our manager of transportation, Danny Schreckengast, with a consulting firm, the school bus consultants, and they are very close to completing the work that we've asked them to do for us to quantify what the cost would be for transportation due to fewer, larger neighborhood geographic shapes in our community. So we're looking at what we currently have is a 2-mile free busing under the code chapter 185 of the state of Iowa. If a student lives more than 2 miles away from their attendance center, they receive free busing. So we want to see what that additional cost is. We ballpark this. We've said this publicly a number of times. Approximately $500,000 more in transportation costs, but we're going to wait for our consultant to verify whether or not we're accurate with that number or not. That was more of an internal estimate. But we're also going to be looking at what would it cost for us to bus at 1.5 miles and exceed the minimum of the Iowa code, and even as short as 1 mile from our elementary attendance center, so we can really see whether or not there's something we might consider doing as a part of our plan. You see, I spoke about that $3 million savings earlier of having fewer, larger elementary attendance centers, and it's very possible that we could ramp up our transportation services and still have a net savings that we can plow back into quality services, instructional services for our schools districts.
And just adding in, I forget who mentioned it, but if we can have more of our students with some of our special populations, ELL, some of our students that are in what we sometimes would call special education, if we can have them in their home neighborhoods, many of them right now are bused across town. So that would actually be a net gain for us to reduce some of the busing. So again, balancing some of these things out. So we're very interested in hearing what these estimates are, because we understand that it is this kind of weather, it's going to be difficult for students to walk further, and we want to try and alleviate some of that worry. Now, we also know that somewhere around 20-22% of our students currently walk or ride a bike or something to school, but the vast majority of our students do not walk. It's not, even from when I was in elementary school back in the 60s and 70s, these are not typically students that are walking. For whatever reason, safety, just convenience, whatever it is, a lot of students are driven to schools today at the elementary level. If you drive by any of ours, you'll see the lines of cars, you'll see the buses trying to manipulate those situations. So.
We've got multiple variations and questions on, if all the saved dollars go to elementary schools, what happens to the middle schools and the high schools and other facilities? Where do they get funding for repairs and things like that?
I'd like to speak to that one, to at least start it off here. I think you heard a few comments about the investment that we've made in our secondary buildings, our middle schools, and our high schools. Washington is the most recent recipient of $33 million. $33 million. We replaced the window wall systems. The complete replacement of both Jefferson and Washington. They're beautiful. I graduated from Jefferson High School in 1973. When I look at Jefferson High School today, it is amazing how beautiful that building looks. We have invested a lot of money in our driveway parking areas there. We have invested in a beautiful new cafeteria serving area inside Jefferson and Washington High Schools. They really look beautiful. Kennedy High School had the first complete retrofit of a state-of-the-art geothermal system. So we've invested between those three high schools about $72 million. And we've also invested in our middle schools previous to our investment in our high schools. We've invested in all 6 of them. They all have now relatively new, not brand new, but relatively new geothermal systems. So they're efficient and they heat and cool far better than they did under the systems that they had of old. So we have invested significant monies in our secondary buildings, and this is the reason why our conversation most recently has been all around our 21 elementaries, because we've invested relatively lower amounts of public resources in our elementaries as we have in our secondaries.
And Steve, so that the other option is what is, if SAFE doesn't happen, then
Our community schools are a product of our past generations of commitment to our school system. Every building that we have is a testimony to either you or your predecessors, your ancestors, your generations that passed before you that ponied up and paid their local property taxes or any other way that they could provide their resources to build the infrastructure that we have today. And so for us to say before you that a local property tax is a reality should not come as a surprise. But if we don't receive SAFE funding, which is a zero property tax impact for $212 million of investment in our elementary infrastructure, then the only other major significant resource is a bond referendum, which requires a 60% supermajority, which has been a major challenge for us. It was in 2001, December the 12th, 2001, that we had, 2000, that we had a $46 million bond issue. At that time, the biggest bond issue in the state of Iowa's history, that passed to 73%. So we did it then, and it's certainly possible that we could do it in the future, but we would prefer to use those resources and have no impact on local property tax if it is all possible.
We've gotten several questions that have come in during this, and one of the most recent I'd like to ask is, how do you intend to get all parties involved in these community meetings going forward? The working parents, single parents, those with small children, the business community. What ideas do you have to get them engaged?
Sure, I think do you have something? I think from the board's perspective, one, we're going to put in our resolution that we will have these partnerships. So when we vote on whatever we vote on, that will be in the language of the vote. We have legal counsel now working with the city on a memorandum of understanding. So we will say, on all of these 21 facilities, we will have city representation in all of those discussions. And again, the committee, we were very intentional in having city representation. We went to Jeff Pomerantz, city manager, and said, Jeff, tell us who you want to be on this. We want city input on this. So we'll continue with that. In terms of families, I can imagine neighborhoods. Several folks from the Kenwood Neighborhood Association were at our meeting last night, which was great to hear their perspectives. Just give us the feet on the ground sort of perspective, the history of it. I can imagine some of the nonprofits. They all served on the committee. Many of them that helped with this, we'll invite them. In terms of daycare at our open houses and things, we provided daycare for young children so the families could come. And again, I think that these meetings, at least from my viewpoint, would be that they would be in those neighborhoods, so at those schools or in facilities near those schools, and again, at a variety of times.
And I agree with that too. We need to go back to the schools so folks can come in and be flexible in our time, because we know folks work. We all work, not everyone works, but we work. But I think sometimes what happens, we make it so it's convenient for us. We really need to speak to the folks in the community and say what works best for you, and not just one session. It needs to be ongoing so we hear everybody's voice, and I think that's what's going to be so important. So no one feels excluded from the conversation.
I think that the Cedar Rapids District is embarking right now on an RFP for architectural services for the next 5 years. And I think some of the firms that have heard specifically what that entails are a bit disappointed to realize that we're really looking for an architect that will provide us for the design of the very basic repair work that we do, the tuck pointing or the roof replacements or the sidewalk concrete asphalt. But what we're saving for the future is the pitting of architectural firms together in a neighborhood concept with neighborhood input to listen to the neighborhoods that we are going to be developing under this plan and to provide their visions of what a new elementary could look like and how it could represent the interests of the neighborhood. So rather than having one firm, one architectural firm, give us their cookie cutter, and I say that with all respect, their idea of what a vision of an elementary could look like, we're going to be bringing in multiple firms, listening to the community input, understanding what it is that the neighborhoods want to see for their vision, and then give us what they believe is an appropriate vision for an elementary building of the future. So we're already thinking about how we're going to have our alignment with our architectural firms and relationships of the future around this idea of neighborhood input and understanding what neighborhoods want, need, and should receive in our community.
Okay. So, one question, how soon will that process begin if a vote happens next week? I mean, when should people start watching for that to begin?
We have started to put the framework together. I wish I had brought that draft framework in front of me. When you get the board packets later in the week, if you take a look at those online, you'll actually be able to look on there because we put parenthetical dates for the start of Coolidge, for example. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. I don't want to do it wrong, but
Approximately, how soon?
I think the first one is January 19. Formally begin the process. We'll informally begin to plan for the process before the time.
One of the other things with all this, no revenues from sales of any of those 8 facilities are included in this. So whether we sell it a school for $1 to the city because maybe there's a need for a senior center or a youth recreation facility or Boys and Girls Club or some other organization wants it and we see the value in that, or if a local developer says we want to come in and make this into a really nice residential retirement facility, whatever it is, we have a lot of flexibility in that, and as a school district we can put parameters on how we sell that. So we have a couple of very historic properties in here. The intention is, for instance, not to tear those down. How can they be used and maintain that historical value to our community? At the same time, there's others that don't have any historical value. What sorts of things might they be used for? And again, that's where the community conversations become so important.
All right, well, I want to just, in respect for time, want to make sure that we are able to wrap this up by 7:30, but I would like to thank our panelists for being here tonight. Steve, Shelley, Brad, Nancy, and John, thank you for, I know that this was a very quick turnaround, and for giving us your attention here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you to Zach Kaczynski and Todd Dorman for being our moderators tonight. And Library for hosting us here tonight, as well as our Gazette staff and everybody that's been working behind the scenes to make this possible. As mentioned at the beginning tonight, we know we did not get through everybody's questions. And if you didn't get a chance to see me up there, I was flashing the okay, done, move on, sign pretty hardcore. So please do not let their brevity and answers be a reflection on the fact that they have a lot more to share. We have a lot more opportunities to get through these questions, and our intent is to take all of the questions and to have them be made public. We're going to be sharing them with our panelists and figuring out the best and most timely way to get all of your questions answered through the Gazette online as well as in publications. So please be on the lookout for that in the days to follow. With that, again, I want to make sure everybody, we wrap this up by 7:30, but thank you guys for being here. Please continue to look to the Gazette for coverage on this and as well as many other topics. We also have a lot of other community discussions that are going to be coming up here in the next few months. So thank you and have a great night. Drive safe.